With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer questions 2, 14, 20 and 24 together. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is still in dire situation because of the winter conditions and a lack of urgently needed aid. Last month, we were pleased that UK-funded tents had entered Gaza to provide critical shelter for 12,000 people, and the government is matching £3 million of donations to the DEC Middle East humanitarian appeal. But far more still needs to be done. We still need much greater access through crossings and barriers to aid lifted in order to deal with this humanitarian crisis.
Anna Dixon.
And the Secretary of State for her response. We've all witnessed the unfolding catastrophic humanitarian disaster in Gaza, exacerbated by the collapse of the Gazan health system and the suspension of aid delivery. I'm therefore shocked that the Israeli government plans to prohibit some 37 international NGOs from operating in Gaza and the West Bank, including Médecins Sans Frontières, ActionAid and the Norwegian Refugee Council. So could the Secretary of State outline what steps the government has taken to prevent this and what more it intends to do?
So State.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend about how incredibly damaging it is to have the deregistration of vital international NGOs who do incredible humanitarian work, including providing life-saving services through thousands of staff worth hundreds of millions of pounds in Gaza. They simply cannot be removed or replaced. It's incredibly destructive to prevent them operating. That's why I led a joint statement on behalf of 10 countries urging the Israeli government to allow these essential international NGOs to operate in a sustained and predictable way. We will pursue this as part of phase 2 of the peace process.
Dr. Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for her answer. My surgical colleague, Mr. Rabour of West Suffolk Hospital, spent a month last year in Gaza at the Nasser Hospital. I met him last week and he gave a graphic description of the situation in and around the hospital. He's one of the brave NHS workers of whom we can all be intensely proud. Now, access to humanitarian aid, as we have said, is very difficult, and many international recognised agencies are lately banned, as indeed I am myself banned. What further representation can we actually make to resolve this? For surely it is in the interests of all people in Israel and in Palestine for this fragile peace to be preserved.
Secretary of State.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend. We need to maintain this fragile ceasefire, but also make progress for peace and also ultimately for the two-state solution that is in the interests of the people of Israel and the people of Palestine. I have also heard horrendous stories about some of the medical conditions and also from some of the brave doctors who were operating there before the ceasefire in the most difficult and dangerous of conditions as well. We are very clear that the humanitarian support that needs still to be surged must include medical supplies, must include healthcare support, and not only is this an issue we are raising continually with the Israeli government, we are also raising this as part of phase 2 of the peace process.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Foreign Secretary for his statement. But the Prime Minister yesterday made a welcome statement on the importance of sovereignty and the international rules-based order. Yet within the state of Palestine, 37 international NGOs will no longer be allowed to deliver humanitarian aid on the say-so of Israel. So can the Foreign Secretary confirm that the UK government understands and accepts continued humanitarian access into Palestine must be determined by the Palestinians, that this cannot be undermined by either Israel or the Board of Peace, and can the Minister say what concrete actions the government intends to take to counter Israeli obstructions and give proper effect to the sovereignty of the State of Palestine?
State.
Well, I agree with him about the destructive impact of deregistering these NGOs. Part of the 20-point plan that Israel signed up to, that all countries signed up to, that President Trump set out, was about substantially increasing humanitarian aid and support in Gaza. Instead, this takes us going backwards. I do think it's significant that the Palestinian Committee, the Palestinian Administration Committee for Gaza, has now been set up. I have continually pressed in all of the international discussions that that committee should be able to take responsibility for significantly increasing humanitarian aid.
Jasmine Qureshi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even during the ceasefire, Israel is blocking humanitarian aid into Gaza, whilst at the same time pushing ahead on illegal settlements in Area E. And these alleged settlements, which has been described by the UK government as flagrant breach of international law. So does the Foreign Secretary accept that by these actions, Israel is saying, essentially, trying to bury the idea of a state of Palestine? And can I ask, apart from good words, what concrete action are we going to be taking to allow this to happen?
State.
Well, as my honourable friend knows, the UK took the historic decision to recognise the state of Palestine in the autumn, and we are clear that ensuring there is a two-state solution does also mean tackling illegal settlement expansion and settler violence. Alongside 26 international partners, we have condemned the E1 settlement plan and condemned the recent steps to further that plan, and I would urge Israel to listen to the weight of international opinion on this, because this needs to be part of delivering the 20-point plan and a just and lasting peace.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State will well know that the terrorist group Hamas refused to disarm, and in fact they enforced their brutal rule on the Palestinian people. Equally, aid trucks that are desperately needed in Gaza are looted by the Hamas terrorists. What steps is the Secretary of State taking to make sure that the international aid that we all want to see given to the Palestinians is not looted and diverted to Hamas?
Well, I think the honourable member raised two important issues there, because we do agree that the decommissioning of Hamas weapons is a central and crucial part of the 20-point plan. That is why the three issues we have continually prioritised have been the establishment of the Palestinian Committee, the increase in humanitarian aid, and the establishment of the process for the decommissioning of Hamas weapons. We put forward proposals based on our experience in Northern Ireland and expertise as well, but I do believe that this urgently needs to make progress as part of Phase 2.
Monica Harding.
Mr. Speaker, there are reports that today, this morning, Israeli security forces arrived in the Sheikh Jarrah UNRWA compound in occupied East Jerusalem. Security guards were forced out of the premises, and bulldozers subsequently entered the compound and began to demolish UNRWA buildings, and the demolitions are ongoing. If this is true, this is an unprecedented attack, not only against UNRWA and its premises, but constitutes a serious violation of international law and the privileges and immunities of the United Nations. What consequential action will the Foreign Secretary take if these reports are true?
So state.
Well, we have already had previously issues last month with issues involving the Israeli authorities entering UNRWA's compound in East Jerusalem without prior authorization, and UN premises are inviolable under international law. So we have already raised this and condemned this, and it is immensely important that everyone recognises the important role that UNRWA plays. This year, the UK has committed £27 million to help UNRWA scale up life-saving aid, including food, water, shelter and medical care.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pressure on the UK to join the expensive and dodgy-looking Gaza Board of Peace has been ramped up overnight by President Trump's messaging. Will the government politely decline the Gaza Board of Peace whilst reviewing its position on Chagos, given the US intervention overnight?
So state.
Slightly contorted question. On the issue, as the honourable member will know, that the Board of Peace proposal was originally part of the 20-point plan around Gaza. The proposals that have been put forward now are very different from what had been previously expected around Gaza. So it's right that there are further international discussions underway on this, and all of those details are being discussed. We will see where that ends up. What I would say is, though, I think the critical issue now is the support for the Palestinian Committee, because Gaza should be run by the people of Gaza, by Palestinians, free from Hamas. And that is the crucial thing now that we need to support and ensure that they have not just the humanitarian support, but also the decommissioning of weapons and the support for their long-term future.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The irony is, of course, that we already have a Board of Peace. It's called the UN, and President Trump is undermining it at every step. 5 days ago, a group of 22 UN experts deemed the ban on the international NGOs as part of a systematic assault on humanitarian operations and a step in a deliberate dismantling of Gaza's lifeline. 21 children have died of extreme cold in recent days. 7,000 tents have been swept away due to weather conditions. Foreign Secretary, we need to do more directly. If these NGOs can't do it, what is the government doing to get tents and shelter and heating into Gaza?
Well, nothing can replace the UN or its charter. Let us be clear about that. It's the bedrock of multilateral cooperation and international law. And I met the Secretary-General of the UN this weekend to reaffirm our support for the UN and the work that it does as part of the marking 80 years of anniversary of the United Nations this weekend. On the humanitarian issues, look, over 3,000 people have been affected by a new wave of heavy rains and strong winds across the Gaza Strip, even just over the last week, with huge concerns about hypothermia, collapsing shelter structures as well. That's why I also discussed with Tom Fletcher from the OCHA about what more we can do to ensure that support is being got into Gaza, and this has to be a priority for phase 2 of the peace process.
Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, as my right honourable friend has just alluded to, there are hundreds of thousands of displaced families in Gaza living in torn tents and roofless homes, exposed to the rain, freezing temperatures and with further storms due. So what further steps will she be able to take to persuade the current Israeli government to allow in the materials necessary for more robust shelter, particularly and immediately for families with young children?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend is right to raise the importance of this, because when you look at really the flimsy shelters that families are in, despite the terrible flooding that they have seen, despite the winter conditions, the impact that this is having, and also contributing to disease and further displacement as well. So we are continuing to urge the Israeli government to change their restrictions that allow the better quality, the provisions, the construction into Gaza, and to make sure that we can get those basic humanitarian needs met. That was the commitment that was made as part of the 20-point plan, not just by Israel, but by all countries. We need action to support that.
Dr. Ellie Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the, frankly, utterly extraordinary news yesterday that Donald Trump has invited Putin and Netanyahu to sit on the Board of Peace, does the Foreign Secretary recognise that it is clear that the Board of Peace is utterly unfit to contribute to the task of peace building? It also doesn't include any Palestinians and almost no women. Does she recognise that it is inappropriate for Britain to participate in it, or indeed Brits? And what does she suggest as an alternative?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, let's be clear. I think the most important organisation network now for the future of Gaza is the Palestinian Committee, the National Administration Committee for Gaza, made up of Palestinians. Gaza should be run by Palestinians. That is crucial, and that is what we should now be supporting to take forward. And then on the wider question, let's be clear, Putin is not a man of peace, and I don't think he belongs in any organisation with peace in the name.
Shadow Minister Wendy-Moore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This House needs the full facts regarding aid entering Gaza and why the government is not more engaged with the CMCC. So I'd like to ask the Foreign Secretary, what steps is she taking to support the disarming of Hamas and secure the immediate release of the remaining hostage? And following White House announcements on the Board of Peace, including Tony Blair, can she confirm what UK input there has been, whether any UK ministers will be involved, and give a clear assurance that the UK would reject President Putin being on the board, given his illegal invasion of Ukraine and alliance with Iran?
Foreign Secretary.
I think I have actually answered every single one of the points that she made already. If she had listened on the decommissioning of Hamas weapons, in fact, we have been one of the leading countries to drive a process of putting forward proposals for the decommissioning of Hamas weapons. We are working with other countries to do so, and we will continue to do so because we think that this is a priority. On the humanitarian work, there has been work done by the CMCC, but it goes nowhere near far enough, and we are seeing deteriorating conditions in many areas because of the winter conditions, and frankly, the removal of NGOs simply goes backwards. On the Board of Peace, it is different from what was proposed, and that is why international discussions are underway. We will see where they end up. But let's be clear, it is the Palestinian Committee and the Palestinian people who now to be leading the running of Gaza going forward.
Elder Miller, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The composition of Donald Trump's Board of Peace now looks increasingly like a rogues gallery, as we've heard, with President Putin being invited to join. Meanwhile, as the Foreign Secretary has said, the Palestinians have been left out of that board entirely, and it's increasingly clear that this is not about peace at all. I have two specific questions to the Foreign Secretary which he has not yet answered. Can the Foreign Secretary tell the House whether government ministers have spoken with Tony Blair about his role? And will the Foreign Secretary categorically condemn these current plans and call instead for the United Nations to lead peace-building and reconstruction efforts in Gaza, with Palestinians at the heart of this?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, we strongly support the role of the United Nations, and that is why, in fact, many of these points were set out as part of a UN Security Council resolution which had widespread support, because we think it is important to have the underpinnings not just of the UN, but international law more widely, but also to maintain that international consensus that we need to move to the next phase. These proposals that have been put forward are different from what was described and actually are not focused on Gaza. We think the focus now for Gaza has to be on the Palestinian Committee and on key practical issues like the surging of humanitarian aid and also the decommissioning of Hamas weapons. Our focus needs to be on the practical next steps, and we will work with everyone to make sure that that happens.
Question number 3, Mr Speaker.
Foreign Secretary.
Mr Speaker, as I set out in the House yesterday, we continue to support the people of Greenland and to make clear that the sovereignty of Greenland is a matter for the future of Greenland, is a matter for the Greenlanders and for the Danes alone. And we are working to increase the support for security across the Arctic region, and that was why I visited Norway and Finland this week. And Mr Speaker, can I apologise that, if with your permission, that was a grouped answer to questions 3 and 7 together.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Yesterday, the Prime Minister attempted to justify the hesitant approach to Greenland, the US and the EU as an attempt to preserve the national interest. Yet there was nothing in the national interest about Brexit, a false hope deal that has left us far away from our European friends, desperately clinging to a US administration who don't care about our national interests. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that the UK are nothing but a cork in the ocean, bobbing around at this moment of international crisis, neither here nor there, and all because of a disastrous, isolationist, self-sabotaging Brexit?
Foreign Secretary.
What I say is the UK works with our NATO allies, some of whom are part of the EU, some of whom, like us and Norway, for example, where we have some of our closest partnerships, are not. But we believe that this is about strengthening our Arctic security, because the Arctic is the gateway for the Russian Northern Fleet to threaten the UK, to threaten Europe, but also to threaten the US and Canada as well. So Arctic security is a transatlantic security issue.
Manderson.
Speaker, and I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement yesterday. I welcome the renewed recognition of the Arctic's strategic importance to Europe's collective security and the need for NATO as a whole to develop a more credible deterrence posture. Can she provide a further update to the House on how the government is using its diplomatic influence within NATO to drive a more coherent long-term strategy for Arctic security rather than relying on individual national responses?
Foreign Secretary.
I welcome my honourable friend's question. We have proposed a stronger role for NATO on Arctic security. So just as NATO currently has a successful Baltic sentry and an Eastern sentry, we are arguing for an Arctic sentry that brings together the operations, the intelligence sharing, the coordination for countries right across the Arctic and also countries like the UK who are heavily affected by Arctic security, even though we are not part of Arctic security, and that is why we are substantially increasing our presence in northern Norway and working with Norway on new groundbreaking frigates.
Colin Miller, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With his threats against Greenland and now against her partners, including the UK, Donald Trump has driven a presidential motorcade through NATO and the entire system of post-war security. I'm pleased that the Prime Minister yesterday made his objections to Trump clear, but words are not enough. We must show President Trump that his actions have consequences and that we will do this in concert with our allies, as we are much stronger when we stand together. Yesterday, the Prime Minister ruled out the idea of preparing retaliatory tariffs to use only in the event that the President carries through with his threats on the 1st of February. Does the Foreign Secretary agree with me that we should take no options off the table when dealing with a corrupt bully like President Trump?
Foreign Secretary.
The UK Prime Minister will always act in our national interests. That means pursuing Britain's security, pursuing Britain's prosperity and pursuing Britain's values. That is what he has done at every stage, and it's exactly why he was so firm with the President about our support for the sovereignty of Greenland. It is why we are working continually with our international allies and cooperating closely with other partners right across Europe to make sure that we are responding in a strong and firm way to prevent a trade war that will cause damage to UK industry, but also to US industry as well, and to build instead the collective partnership on security, which is what's in all our interests.
Richard Quigley.
Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is no place for forced labour in our global economy, especially when the victims are so often women, children and persecuted minority groups. We are working through a range of multilateral bodies, including the G7, the UN and the OSCE, to eradicate forced labour from supply chains. And we are currently reviewing the effectiveness of our rules around the responsible business conduct to ensure the UK continues to set the global standard in the elimination of forced labour.
Richard Quigley.
I thank the Minister for his response. However, the UK's Joint Committee on Human Rights has warned that without stronger action, we risk falling behind the EU and the US and even becoming a dumping ground for goods produced with forced labour. Will the government commit to introducing legislation that sends a clear and unequivocal message that the UK stands firmly against Uyghur forced labour and will not allow such products into our market?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? We are clear that no company in the UK should have forced labour in its supply chain. We are committed to promoting and protecting human rights, including in Xinjiang, and we continue to work with international partners to hold China to account for their human rights violations. The government's review of responsible business conduct is considering a range of policy options to tackle forced labour.
Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, as his right honourable friend, the Energy Minister, insists that we must move as quickly as possible to renewables, may I ask the Minister what steps does he have in place to ensure that the 90% of processed materials for renewables do not include slave labour and human rights abuses?
Minister. Can I thank him for his question? We, of course, support voluntary human rights due diligence in businesses as recommended by the UN in its guiding principles on human rights. And as I've already mentioned in answer to my honourable friend, as part of the government's review on responsible business conduct, these will be part of the options we take forward as His Majesty's government.
Number
5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we work closely with our international partners to deter and disrupt those responsible for malicious cyber activity. And to date, 42 international partners have supported UK activity to expose cyber threats. 74 countries are members of the Counter Ransomware Initiative led by the UK, and 27 countries have publicly endorsed the UK and France Pall Mall Code of Practice, which aims to tackle cyber proliferation intrusion tools.
Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister will remember that when the Russia-backed Lockbit cybercrime network was smashed in 2024, it was the direct result of intensive collaboration between the United Kingdom, Europe and the United States, working together to defend Europe from Russia's hybrid attacks, which only seek to weaken our role in the world. Is this not a reminder that we are all safer on both sides of the Atlantic when we work together and never forget where the real threats to our national security come from?
Minister.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree, Mr. Speaker, with her remarks, and indeed they echo the remarks we heard this morning from the Speaker of the House of Representatives with you, Mr. Speaker, about working together as close allies and across NATO, and it's good to welcome guests here today from the NATO Parliamentary Assembly too. But she is absolutely right to raise this issue, as evidenced by the 2024 Lockbit and the 2025 Media Land sanctions packages. The UK works closely with key partners and remains committed to using all available tools to defend against cyber threats, and coordination with Australia, with the EU, with the United States and other allies demonstrates to adversaries we will not tolerate these assaults on our public and private institutions and our democracies.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister, as always, for his very comprehensive response. When it comes to ransomware and what we're trying to do in technology, Northern Ireland leads the way in cybersecurity, South East of England leads the way in cybersecurity, but it's always advancing. The Minister has responsibility to ensure that we're protected, I know that. At the same time, we need to ensure that the technology moves forward to equal our enemies or to outdo them. Can the Minister give us some assurance that that will happen and that Northern Ireland will be part of that? Thank you.
Minister.
Well, he rightly extols the virtues and skills of the excellent workforce in Northern Ireland and indeed across the UK on these issues. And I've had the pleasure, Mr. Speaker, of meeting with a number of cybersecurity companies. We're doing all we can to increase the skills chain and make sure that we can keep those steps ahead of our adversaries, because we will not tolerate this activity. It hits consumers and individuals here in the UK, it risks our national security, and we will work with others to defend this country.
Shadow Minister Andrew Sterling.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Iran is a cyber menace, committing digital warfare against democracies around the world and its own people, cutting internet most recently from its own citizens to hide the scale of the atrocities it is committing. So can the government outline whether it has any plans to use its own cyber capabilities to take on Tehran in its moment of weakness, and how it will prevent Tehran from evading tariffs by using cryptocurrency?
Minister.
Well, can I welcome him, perhaps his unexpected elevation, but welcome him to his position and thank him for his important question, which is on a very, very serious matter, which is the threat from our adversaries. And he is right to point out Iran. There are, of course, many others who are attempting to damage our national security, to hit consumers and individuals here in the UK. He will understand I'm not going to go into operational details on any matter relating to our cyber defences, but he can be assured that we keep the activities of our adversaries very, very closely in our mind, and we are taking steps to make sure we can defend this country against all threats from wherever they come.
Blake Stevens.
Question number 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Chagos Archipelago Marine Protected Area is one of the world's most important marine environments. It's been rightly been recognised by members across the House, and both the UK and Mauritius are committed to its protection. I can confirm to him that no commercial fishing will be allowed, but low levels of artisanal fishing will be permitted for the sustenance of the Chagosian communities, which is compatible with nature conservation, and we're working closely with Mauritius to ensure that adequate patrolling capabilities will be maintained after the Marine Protected Area enters into force.
Blake Stevens.
Thank the Minister for his response. A recent report from Yale University ranks Mauritius last out of 131 states for stringency in its marine protected areas, and a woeful 173 out of 180 for protection for biodiversity. Mauritius has even admitted it doesn't have capacity to patrol the area and is open to commercial fishing, and I recognise the response that the Minister just gave, but Britain has kept the Chagos marine environment pristine for 50 years. Why doesn't the government want to secure this legacy in law?
Minister.
Well, with the greatest respect, because I know he raises these issues with sincerity, I was just very, very clear, and it was on the 3rd of November that Mauritius announced the creation of the Chagos Archipelago Marine Protected Area, and they've confirmed that no commercial fishing will be allowed in any part of the MPA. We're working very closely with them on the issues around patrolling, working very, very closely to protect the environment. These are important issues, and I can assure him that we are absolutely seized of them.
Foreign Secretary Dame Pitts-Patel.
The Prime Minister previously said that Five Eyes partners and the United States backed the Chagos surrender bill, but today the American president has publicly opposed it, rightly citing the very concerns that these benches have raised around the malign influence of China and Russia benefiting directly as a result of surrendering the Chagos Islands. Is President Trump right? And given Labour's Chagos surrender bill will cost £35 billion, compromise our national security and betray the rights of the Chagosian community, when will the government finally see sense and scrap this shameful treaty?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, she again makes some wild claims about costs, which are simply not the case. We have been absolutely clear that the UK will never compromise on our national security. As we have made repeatedly clear, the agreement we have struck is vital for protecting our national security and that of our allies and guaranteeing the long-term future of a base that is crucially important for the UK and the United States. Our deal secures the operations of the joint US-UK base on Diego Garcia for generations. It's got that backing across Five Eyes, as well as other international partners. I would remind her very, very clearly that in May, the US Secretary of State said the Trump administration is determined that this agreement secures the long-term, stable and effective operation of the joint US-UK military facility on Diego Garcia. We will, of course, have discussions with the administration in the coming days to remind them of the strength of this deal and how it secures the base. And I am surprised these comments have been made, obviously, in the context of difficult conversations about Greenland, which she joins us with in standing for their sovereignty and self-determination and reflection. And I would just urge her to be a little bit more reflective in her comments.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 8.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, one of the Foreign Office's most serious and important duties is standing up for British nationals who have been wrongly detained overseas and supporting the families here at home working desperately for their release. We're committed to strengthening those efforts, including through the appointment of a dedicated envoy for complex detention cases, and we expect to confirm that appointment in the near future.
Douglas McAllister.
Mr. Speaker, exactly 3,000 days ago, my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal was imprisoned in India. 3,000 days later, he remains arbitrarily detained, facing the death penalty on trumped-up charges, having been brutally tortured to make a confession. While in opposition, our Prime Minister rightly recognised my constituent's detention as arbitrary. We need to do more than just raise his case with Indian counterparts. My constituent was acquitted in March last year of all charges, but now faces essentially 8 duplicate cases based on the same evidence. So does the Foreign Secretary or the Minister agree with me this is clearly double jeopardy as recognised under Indian, international and UK law? And will the government make that clear to Indian counterparts?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for the persistence and the force of his advocacy for his constituents. Despite progress in Mr. Johal's legal proceedings, as he says, 8 of the cases against him remain outstanding. We continue to raise concerns about Mr. Johal's prolonged detention with the Government of India at every appropriate opportunity, emphasising the need for a prompt, full and just resolution of Mr. Johal's cases within India's independent legal system.
Christian Jobby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, Jagtar Singh Johal is not the only case of human rights violations against British citizens across the world at the moment. And one of our biggest allies has just said that peace is no longer a priority for them. So with the world such a dangerous place and such a threat to the human rights of British citizens abroad, would the Minister agree with me that the time has come to make assistance, consular assistance, a legal right of British citizens across the globe?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're committed to introducing a right for consular assistance. We'll return to this House with more detail about what form that may take.
Ian Lavery. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have consistently called on all parties to comply with their international humanitarian law obligations in Palestine, and where this government has had concerns about Israel's commitment to those obligations, we have taken decisive action. That has included stopping exports to the IDF that might be used in Gaza, suspending negotiations on a new free trade agreement, and last month voting in favour of a UN resolution which welcomed the ICJ's advisory opinion on Israel's obligations to allow life-saving humanitarian assistance to reach Palestinian civilians.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In July 2024, the ICJ ruled that the Israeli occupation and settlements were illegal and must be ended and dismantled. Then, in September 2024, the UN General Assembly gave Israel 12 months to bring to an end its unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territories. A deadline, Mr. Speaker, which is now lapsed by more than 4 months. Minister, why, after a year and a half, has the government still not published its response to the ICJ advisory opinion? Is there something we don't know, but perhaps we should?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for the question. In that period, the UK has made a range of very significant determinations in relation to our policy in the Middle East. Of course, we continue to consider the Court's advisory opinion on Israel's occupation carefully. There was lots in that advisory opinion with which we agree, and is indeed already government policy. We agree settlements are illegal. We have already taken strong action against them. Since this government came into office, we've introduced 3 packages of sanctions related to violence against communities in the West Bank, and we continue to keep these questions under review.
Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since the recent ceasefire came into effect, over 450 Palestinians have been killed by Israel. The UNICEF reports that over 100 Palestinian children have been killed in Gaza since October the 10th. Israeli airstrikes continue, and the mental and physical torture and violence continues unabated. Can the Minister tell the children that are still alive in Gaza what action the UK government will take to force Israel to comply with international law and to allow essential humanitarian aid into Gaza, but also to make this ceasefire a real ceasefire and stop the killing?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know how deeply so many of our constituents, indeed so many members in this House, consider these issues, raise these issues. We are continuing to take action in the way that the Foreign Secretary has already set out this morning, and those actions will continue. It is vital that the ceasefire holds, that we make progress in the 3 areas set out by the Foreign Secretary already, and that is the priority of these ministers.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 10, please.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are committed to international development, but we must modernise our approach to reflect the world we live in and the threats our country faces while maintaining economic stability at home. We are committed to meeting the older budgets that have been set out, but with less money we must focus on greater impact. Every pound must deliver for the UK taxpayer and the people we support, while we will sharpen our focus on humanitarian, health, climate and nature, underpinned by economic development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his answer. The United States government has cut funding for research and development into life-saving health solutions that help the world's poorest people. In this context, the UK has the opportunity to embrace world-leading scientists who are no longer welcome elsewhere. So will the government seize this opportunity to both continue progress on life expectancy in the global south and boost the UK's economy by increasing its spending on global health research and development?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't comment on the US decision. It's a matter for the administration. In terms of our own support in the ODA context, as I've mentioned, one of those focuses now moving forward will be on health. And of course, we've announced previously to the House additional funding to tackling life-limiting conditions, particularly in the continent of Africa. So the work around health and life-saving work carries on.
The conflict in Sudan is affecting millions of people, including thousands of women affected by horrific sexual violence. I've been hearing from aid workers on the ground who are working with those women. Can the Minister assure the House that despite aid budget cuts, support for the women victims of sexual violence in the conflict of Sudan will not be cut?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for her question, Mr Speaker? I know what a huge issue and importance it is to all members across the House. I can confirm that additional funding has been allocated in relation to the Sudan conflict. We are, of course, calling for the violence to end, and particularly for the violence that is targeted at women and girls. And I can assure her that part of this continuing funding is in supporting and trying to tackle the very extreme levels of sexual violence that women are experiencing in Sudan.
Sir Andrew Mitchell.
Of course, Mr Speaker, as the Minister will know, part of the ODA budget goes to invest in businesses, creating employment in the poorest parts of the world. For example, through BII, British Investment International, undoubtedly now the best DFI in the world. Will the Minister continue to ensure that BII receives injections of capital so that they can go on doing this brilliant work and earning a decent return for the British taxpayer?
Minister.
Can I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question? I'm pleased to say that the National Development Minister, Baroness Chapman, in the other place, is due to meet imminently with the group, and we will continue to work, indeed in my conversations with nations in the ODA context, about how we can do more support for business as one of the changes of how we'll see ODA working moving forward.
David Tell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I hate to disagree with my colleague opposite, who I respect greatly, but I do wonder, in the era where we have less money, whether we do need to focus on reaching the poorest people the most. And there are other models, including the International Finance Facility for Education, the International Finance Facility for Immunisation, that offer ways in which we can leverage in much more money. By putting in a small amount, we can leverage up to 4 times more money out. So would ministers meet with me and a Treasury Minister to discuss proposals like this, so that we can look at innovative forms for development finance in an era of less ODA?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question, Mr Speaker? I am, of course, more than happy to meet with him as diaries allow.
Gareth Emerson.
Number 11, please, Mr Speaker.
So stay.
Mr Speaker, the UK continues to support the Ukrainian people in the face of unrelenting Russian aggression, including the targeting of Ukraine's energy, infrastructure and civilians. On Friday, we were proud to mark the anniversary of the 100-year partnership that we agreed with Ukraine last year, and we will continue to provide support, both military and economic, and for their energy security as well.
Gareth Emerson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Association of Ukrainians in Great Britain, Bolton branch, is situated in my constituency of Bolton North East, helping families settle and keeping those community ties strong. As the Foreign Secretary mentioned, as the UK marked the first anniversary of the UK-Ukraine 100-year partnership, what more is the Foreign Secretary doing, working across government, to ensure Ukrainians in the UK are provided with the support they need to rebuild their lives?
Foreign Secretary.
Can I thank the honourable member for her question? This is exactly this 100-year partnership is about our people-to-people links, our long-term connections between the UK and Ukraine. And if I can just take a personal moment on this, Mr Speaker, I can report that one of the teenagers who came to stay with us in Castleford at the very beginning of the Ukraine war and has since returned to Kyiv, has continued with her training to be an international standard ballroom dancer, is back in the UK with her partner this week in the run-up to an international competition, and I wish them both the very best.
Sir Julian Lewis.
I'm sure the entire House endorses what the Foreign Secretary has just said. In a week when the government is sadly letting down Hong Kongers in London, Chagossians in exile and Northern Ireland veterans in retirement, can we absolutely rely upon continued support for Ukraine's gallant resistance to atrocious Russian imperialism?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I think really the honourable member should know better than to ask a question like that, as he knows. The UK has been continually strong in our support for Ukraine, for the people of Ukraine, and also for Ukraine's continued military resistance. I think for too long Russia has underestimated the people of Ukraine, but also Ukraine's friends, and that is why the UK, through the coalition of the willing, has been leading support for Ukraine.
Shadow Minister Winniborn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Foreign Secretary will have heard President Zelensky's warnings last week about the supply of air defence missiles. We must heed them. Can she confirm whether the government is now going to make more weapons available, immediately scale up production or broker new military aid packages with our allies to make sure there is a constant supply of missiles?
Well, the UK is working very closely with our partners, including through NATO, but also more broadly, to ensure that Ukraine has the military support they need, including the weapons and the equipment, but also support for their energy infrastructure, support for their intelligence gathering as well, where the UK plays an important role. And what we have done is, in fact, set forward commitments alongside the French government as well, and that forward lean on the ability to support Ukraine if a peace agreement is reached, backed by security guarantees. So I think the UK is really very much leading the military and wider support for Ukraine.
Dan Carden, starting topicals.
Topical number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, in a few weeks' time, we will reach the 4th anniversary of the Ukraine war, and extreme efforts have been made over recent months to pursue a just and lasting peace, but still we have seen no sign that Russia is willing to make peace. And in the early hours of today, Russia attacked Ukraine with 34 missiles and 339 drones. This follows 4 previous nights in which Russia fired 537 drones at Ukrainian cities, largely targeting energy infrastructure. Ukraine's energy system is experiencing its most acute crisis of the war, and Kyiv residents are currently receiving 3 hours of power, followed by 10-hour outages. So on the 16th of January, as we marked the first anniversary of the 100-year partnership, I announced a further £20 million of UK support for vital energy repairs. Our commitment to supporting Ukraine is unwavering.
Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for that update. The brutal Iranian regime is dying and a new Iran is being born, and we can assist that process in their interests and ours by banning the IRGC. If the Foreign Secretary requires a new legislative instrument for a prescription mechanism for state and state-linked bodies, will she bring that to the House? And will the Foreign Office prepare for the day after, convening opposition parties to cohere them and mobilise expertise to decide on a future democratic...
Come on, you've got to help me to get others in.
Well, my honourable friend will know that as Home Secretary, I commissioned the review of the legislation, which recommended changes because the existing legislation is drawn up around terrorism and we need to be able to deal with state-backed threats. I can also assure him that both I and the new Home Secretary take extremely seriously the threats from Iran.
Foreign Secretary Dame Patel.
Speaker, the government has just given planning permission to the new Chinese superb embassy, and it's 240 pages, and there it is for us to read. All the time while Jimmy Lai, a British national, continues to be imprisoned in appalling conditions on bogus political charges under the disgraceful Hong Kong national security law. So does the Foreign Secretary agree that it is unacceptable for China to be rewarded with this spy hub in the heart of London while Jimmy languishes in prison?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the Shadow Foreign Secretary will know that we have made the strongest of criticisms of the decision on Jimmy Lai. We continue to pursue this issue with the Chinese government and to stress the urgent need for him to be released immediately on humanitarian grounds. She has raised the issue of the independent planning decision, and she will know the independent planning processes that need to be gone through, and I understand the Security Minister will be making a statement to the House on this topic shortly following this session. All I would point out to her is that diplomatic consent was given by her hero, Boris Johnson. She had many years as Home Secretary to pursue any concerns that she had.
Mr. Speaker, in light of her remarks and the fact that Jimmy Lai's sentencing is expected soon, does she agree that when the Prime Minister goes to Beijing and goes to kowtow to Beijing and he comes back with no movement on Jimmy Lai's release, should that trip be regarded as a failure of British diplomacy?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, we believe it is exactly because we have deep concerns on issues around Jimmy Lai and the need for his urgent humanitarian release, but also on wider security issues that we should engage with the Chinese government. Refusing to engage with the Chinese government when we have such serious issues and concerns would actually be irresponsible.
Rinder Singh Josam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited the Lodge Community Centre in West Bromwich to meet with 5 of the 25 young people who had arrived in the UK from Gaza to receive specialist medical attention, and they were present there with their families at a fund day put on by the Yemeni Community Association. I spoke with them about their experience in Gaza, their journey here and here in the UK. So can the Minister tell the House what learning has the Department taken from the programme so far, in particular the support required by the young people and their families whilst they're in the UK, and is it the intention to expand the project further?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the House will be aware, we've supported a number of sick and injured children to leave Gaza. I'm very proud of our work in this area. We work closely across government, including with our colleagues in DHSC, MHCLG and indeed with local authorities to ensure that children and families arriving in the UK receive the help and support they need. In relation to future plans, I'm sure I'll return to the House in due course.
Joe Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Trump's new version Board of Peace will apparently cost $1 billion to join. Trump will chair it for life, and Putin will be invited to join and offer his views on peacemaking. Now, I understand the Foreign Secretary is still having conversations about it, but has she managed to identify a single good reason for the UK to join?
Minister.
As the Foreign Secretary set out earlier, the Board of Peace was part of the 20-point plan, which we welcomed. There was a UN Security Council resolution, which also enshrines the progress made in the talks. Of course, we want to see the ceasefire hold in Gaza. We are fully engaged with our American and other counterparts on these questions. But as the Foreign Secretary set out already, we are discussing with our allies the way ahead.
Lorraine Beavers.
Settler violence and expansion in the occupied West Bank is a daily threat to Palestinian communities. In the face of persistent violence, entire villages have been forcibly displaced. This is ethnic cleansing, enabled by the Israeli state. Does the Foreign Secretary agree with me that a ban on trade with Israeli settlements would show Israel that we are serious in opposing this disgraceful activity?
Foreign Secretary.
What I would say to the Honourable Member is we are deeply concerned about the escalating settler attacks and the fact that they have reached new heights, with more attacks last year than in any year since the United Nations began recording such incidents. We need the Government of Israel to abide by its obligations around settlements and also around settler violence, but we also need to ensure that we pursue this as part of the broader peace plan process, the 20-point plan process, to build the greatest possible coordination around delivering not just peace for Gaza, but a two-state solution.
In Europe, both Allied and Russian, I wonder if the Foreign Secretary could articulate the risk she thinks that the UK is taking when it has such a small military and is committing several thousand troops, maybe even tens of thousands of troops, to Ukraine through the coalition of the willing.
Well, the UK government, this government, is responsible now for the biggest increase in defence investment since the Cold War, because we recognise the importance of defending our national security. And I would also say to him that Ukraine's security is our security. The threat from Russia affects us all.
Jeff Smith.
Speaker, it's going to be impossible to get the necessary aid into Gaza until the Rafah crossing is fully open. Can the Minister update us on progress in trying to persuade the Netanyahu government to do the right thing and open the Rafah crossing?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question and his continued advocacy on these questions. The Rafah crossing, and indeed other crossings, was clearly outlined in the 20-point plan as needing to open. There have been discussions between various partners, but we continue to press the Israelis to open all the crossings now.
Stephen Gathens.
Mr. Speaker, an opinion
poll at the weekend in the Sunday Herald shows that 3/4 of Scots would vote to join the European Union. They get that leaving the EU was a disaster a decade ago, and it's even more of a disaster given the international situation now. So why does this government continue to pursue yesterday's policies backed up by yesterday's men and women?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with the greatest respect, he knows that this government has strengthened our relationships with the EU, has got a security and defence partnership, is securing an SPS deal, is rejoining Erasmus+. These are all things that are going to make a tangible difference, both for people in Scotland and across the United Kingdom, and we're very proud of them.
Right, Leader.
In her Sunday Times interview 2 weeks ago, the Foreign Secretary warned that the only person who benefits when NATO is divided is Vladimir Putin. That warning looks even more relevant today, so can I ask her once again to remind her colleagues across the Atlantic that this is the time we come together as an alliance and remember who our true enemies are?
Well, I gather that their sentiment was expressed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the US Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, who has been with us in Parliament over the last few days. I think there are many people on both sides of the Atlantic, across Europe and across North America, who recognise the importance, the vital importance of our NATO alliance, of keeping all of us safe.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Peelin Omar, has asked me about a ceasefire which was announced on Sunday between the Syrian government and the SDF, which has already unravelled, with fighting resuming in less than 24 hours. What is the Foreign Secretary doing to promote humanitarian access, international monitoring and a long-term reconciliation between the Kurdish people in Aleppo and northern Syria and the Syrian government? And does it support a more devolved government solution to bring about a lasting peace for the Kurdish people?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, many across the House will be aware of the fast-moving situation in north-east Syria. It is of concern to the British Government. We are calling for de-escalation and we want a halt to the advance into the north-east. We continue to focus on the humanitarian situation in Syria. Over 16.5 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance, and we are delivering up to £104 million of assistance this year.
Could I ask the Minister what action the UK Government is taking to support Tamils in seeking justice for past and current injustices?
Mr. Speaker, the UK is active in seeking justice and accountability for Sri Lanka's Tamil community, and indeed we lead in the UN's Human Rights Council on the resolution on Sri Lanka. Last year, we sanctioned Sri Lankans for human rights violations in the civil war, and we've made clear to the Sri Lankan government the importance of improved human rights for all in Sri Lanka, as well as reconciliation. And let me take the opportunity to wish the Tamil community a happy Thai Pongal.
Shocker Adam.
Despite the Minister's assertion that the government is holding the Israeli government to account, I just would like to remind them that a tender by the Israeli government has just been passed for a further illegal construction of more than 3,000 homes in the E1 project in the West Bank. This will now completely cut the West Bank into half. So will the government now comply with the ICJ's opinion that third states have a duty, like ours, to bring Israelis' illegal occupation to an end by imposing sanctions on Israeli ministers in their professional capacity and prohibit UK companies from illegal settlements?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Foreign Secretary and I have set out the position in relation to settlements over the course of this session, but I want to be clear, we have been the strongest that we can in condemnation of the increase both in violence with settlers and settlements themselves. I have, from this dispatch box, announced sanctions indeed on Israeli ministers, including Mr. Smotrich and Mr. Ben-Gvir.
Martin Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I proudly declare that I'll be visiting the Falkland Islands as a guest of their government next month. What can the UK government do to alleviate EU tariffs of between 6 and 18% on their fishing exports so that the Falklands government have more money to spend on health, education and their treasured environment?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we remain strong defenders of the Falkland Islands as part of our great British family globally, and I was pleased to speak with the new Legislative Assembly just the other day. It's of course the Brexit deal that the previous government negotiated that left the Falklands out when it comes to tariffs, but we continue to work very closely with them on a range of trade and tariff issues and have done so successfully in relation to the United States.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Israeli occupation of the West Bank has resulted in almost 1,000 deaths over the past year and a half. the loss of villages, the loss of life and the continued enabling of settler violence against ordinary Palestinian people in their villages. And this morning there are reports that the Israeli Defence Force is now demolishing UNRWA headquarters in Jerusalem. When is the British government going to do something serious with sanctions against Israel for their continued illegal occupation of the West Bank?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think I answered the substance of that question in the last answer. We are aware of the reports in relation to the UNRWA headquarters in East Jerusalem, and as the Foreign Secretary set out already, we're taking them very seriously indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over 900 doctors have been killed by the Iranian regime since 1979. A leading medical union warns that the Iran state health system is near collapse and medicines are increasingly scarce, leaving children vulnerable for basic care. Does my right honourable friend agree that urgent international action is needed to hold the regime to account, particularly for the devastating impact on paediatric care?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend is right to raise the deep humanitarian concerns from not having adequate health care in Iran. Their point comes after we have also seen in recent weeks the most brutal of killings by the Iranian regime and the deep concern about the safety of protesters. I can also report to the House we have secured a special session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva to take place on the 23rd of January, and that will also be an opportunity to raise exactly these issues.
Last year, President Trump, when he was frustrated with President Zelensky, withdrew for a short period intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Can the Foreign Secretary, overseas GCHQ and MI6, assure the House and my constituents that should such a threat at some point develop from the White House, that intelligence sharing will be withdrawn, even for a temporary period, with the United Kingdom, that the Foreign Secretary will remind the US President and her counterpart that this Five Eyes partnership keeps Americans safe every single day of the week as well?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can say to the honourable member that I first had visits in Washington about the strengths of the Five Eyes partnership and meetings, including meetings with the CIA and others, more than 25 years ago. Our Five Eyes partnership runs back many generations now and is deep and important, and also continues to take incredibly seriously the threats from Russia in Ukraine.
Marshal de Cordova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With 2 out of 3 FCDO-funded programmes dedicated to disability inclusion coming to an end this year, what targets will this government set to ensure that its remaining programming will prioritise and can be accessed by disabled people, 80% of whom live in the Global South? And can the Minister also offer some assurances that there will be sufficient capacity within the FCDO to support disabled people across the globe?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for her question? The UK has long promoted global disability rights, and our global programmes are supporting disability inclusion in health, education, employment, plus access to innovative assistive technology. In addition to our work mainstreaming disability inclusion across FCDO's priorities, the UK is co-chairing the Global Action on Disability Network to strengthen international coordination on disability rights and accelerate this progress, including in the Global South.
James Wilde.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Iranian regime is killing protesters in their thousands, and the communication blackout is enabling abuses to happen away from the public view. The Minister said yesterday they must restore the internet. What is the government doing with partners so we can hear the voices of these freedom fighters?
Minister.
As I said to the House yesterday, Mr. Speaker, we treat the blackout of the internet in Iran as a breach of the human rights of the Iranian people. We continue to work on this with our partners for the reasons that my ministerial colleagues have set out. I won't give further commentary on operational business.
To Danny Chambers.
Mr. Speaker, allies do not threaten each other, either military or economically, and so the whole House will be troubled by comments from the Trump administration over the last couple of days. What is the Foreign Secretary doing to communicate with our NATO allies to the Trump administration how unacceptable this is, and what are we doing to ensure the integrity of our NATO alliance?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the honourable member will know the Prime Minister has spoken to the President. I have spoken to Secretary of State Rubio. As I set out in the statement yesterday, tariff threats are no way to treat allies, but it is also important now we strengthen our international cooperation on issues like Arctic security, whilst respecting sovereignty and collective security, and that means the sovereignty of Greenland at its heart.
John Whitby.
Israel is the only country in the world that automatically and systematically prosecutes children in military courts, trying between 500 and 700 Palestinian children this way each year. According to Save the Children, these children are at serious risk of contagious disease, hunger and abuse. Can the Minister reassure me that the government is doing all it can to put pressure on the Israeli government to end this practice?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are deeply concerned about the detention of Palestinian children by the Israeli military and indeed about the allegations that he refers to. The UK calls for all reports to be fully investigated. The arrest and detention of children must follow due process in line with international juvenile justice standards, and we call on all parties to the conflict to grant the ICRC immediate and unfettered access.
Andrew Rosenthal.
Mr. Speaker, sir, will the Foreign Secretary explain that if, and rightly so, she supports the self-determination of the Greenlandic people as part of the Kingdom of Denmark, why does she not also support the self-determination of the Chagosian people to remain a British overseas territory?
Foreign Secretary.
I'll just say to the honourable member, he likes to call himself a patriot. He has just joined the party that is the weakest on Russia, a country that threatens our country, and led by a leader who has continued to question the role of Russia beginning the Ukraine war, the role of NATO, and also even in the Salisbury killings. I think he should look a little bit inwards before he tries to make points in here.
Chair of the Select Committee, Sarah Champion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Foreign Secretary, given the scale of the FCDO planned budget reductions and significant staffing cuts, what assessment has been made of which policy areas will be deprioritised as a result of these measures? What redundancy mitigation steps have been undertaken in line with the 2016 Civil Service protocols, and how these changes are expected to impact both UK personnel serving overseas and country-based staff?
Well, my honourable friend will know as that we have been doing extensive work to ensure that the Foreign Office is focused on the key priorities and also in delivering for the national interest. She will know too that there was an expansion in the staffing, including the UK-based staffing of the Foreign Office quite significantly over the previous 5 years, and actually it is right that we ensure the Foreign Office is now most focused on both the national security issues, the prosperity issues, and also many of the issues she and her committee are concerned about around international development as well. And will continue to provide information to her committee on this.
Bobby Moore.
Mr. Speaker, a 14-year-old child, the son of my constituent Mr. Greaves, has been detained by the French state for 440 days. He's a British citizen with no dual nationality. He has had no schooling in that period of time, and most concerning of all, has not even received a single welfare visit by the British consulate, despite having been chased many times. So will the Foreign Secretary intervene personally in this case and meet with me to be able to secure a welfare visit?
Mr. Speaker, I'll be happy to meet with the honourable gentleman to discuss the case.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, Uganda held elections. There were wide-ranging accounts of people being prevented from going to polling stations, ballot stuffing. In one polling district, there were more votes cast than there were electors. Now there's widespread violence, and the son of the so-called president of Uganda has threatened to murder the leader of the opposition, Bobi Wine, who lost the election. What can the Foreign Secretary tell me about the veracity of the elections? What should do to protect British citizens in Uganda and to ensure the safety of members of the NUP there as well?
Can I thank him for his question? We have consistently advocated for peaceful and credible elections and encourage any disputes to be addressed through peaceful and legal means. In relation to the opposition leader, we've engaged across the political spectrum to advocate for peaceful elections, and including for the opposition candidates to be able to campaign freely and safely, and we continue to do so, including through our High Commission.
Dr. Pinkerton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In answer to an earlier question, the Foreign Secretary said that the future of Greenland should be determined by Greenlanders and Danes. And yet members across this House are just finding out that any opportunity to give Chagossians a referendum have been stripped from this afternoon's discussions on the Chagos bill. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary, why does she think that Chagossians don't deserve the same rights that she considers to be so fundamental to Greenlanders?
Well, Mr. Speaker, he knows we're going to be discussing these issues this afternoon. We'll have ample time to discuss them. He's got amendments down, and of course he knows that we've engaged extensively with Chagossian communities, and I have myself included.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the ICC's Deputy Chief Prosecutor said atrocities would be repeated in Sudan from town to town unless impunity for belligerents ended. So can I ask, what measures the UK Government has been taking to make it clear to the SPLM-N, as well as to the RSF and SAF, that they must protect civilians and let aid through?
Foreign Secretary.
Can I thank my right honourable friend for raising this, because the continuing humanitarian crisis and horrendous violence in Sudan is deeply troubling, and I worry this is not getting sufficient international attention. I have discussed this extensively with the UN Secretary-General this weekend about what further action can be taken and what concerted pressure can be put on any country that has any influence on the warring parties. We urgently need a ceasefire, but we also need an end to the horrendous and brutal violence, particularly the sexual violence towards women.
Mr. Speaker, through his new folly over Greenland, President Trump is increasingly bringing the UK closer to Europe. Would the UK allow European forces, at Denmark's request, use UK's command infrastructure for operations in and around Greenland?
Minister. Well, the Honourable Lady knows that we already work very closely with Denmark, of course, in NATO, and indeed the Foreign Secretary made clear our desire for an Arctic Sentry programme, and of course we work with other partners in the High North in the GEF, so we already work very closely together.
Sarah Coombs.
Speaker, last week I met a mother from my constituency who told me a terrible story. In October, her daughters were taken supposedly for a day out at the fair by their father, but they never came home. It seems he has abducted them and taken them out of the country, either to Afghanistan or Pakistan. Can the Minister set out what the government can do about these kind of abductions, and will they meet with me to discuss how we get these little girls home?
Minister.
Of course I will, Mr. Speaker.
Final question, Colin Lockhart.
Mr. Speaker, Yemen is now the third most dangerous country in the world to be a Christian, according to Open Doors' World Watch List, which was released last week. Since January, over 50 Yemenis Christians have been arrested and imprisoned, facing intimidation, interrogation and risk of torture. Will the Minister explain why freedom of religion and belief is not made a clear prerequisite for continued aid, UK aid, with robust monitoring on the ground?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for an opportunity to comment on aid into Yemen. As I'm sure the honourable member will know, there are significant restrictions on aid into the north of Yemen, where the Houthis are in control. It is rather easier in the south of Yemen to get aid in, but given the events referred to earlier in the session, this remains complex. We continue to prioritise the freedom of religious belief, including through our excellent envoy, a member in this House, and I'm very happy to meet with the honourable member to discuss these issues further.
That completes questions. We'll let the front bench change over. Right, we come to the first statement. Secretary of State, Liz Kendall.
Thank you. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a statement on the next steps this government will take to keep children safe online and give them the childhood they deserve. Last week, I said in this House that AI and technology have huge potential to create jobs and growth, diagnose and treat disease, transform our public services, and so much more besides. But this government knows we will only seize this potential if the benefits of technology are felt by all, not just a few at the top, and above all, if people know they and their children are safe online. We've already made significant progress on this crucial issue. The Online Safety Act brought in one of the most robust systems globally, with groundbreaking steps to tackle illegal content and activity and to protect children from harmful and age-inappropriate content. But we have long known there is more to do. My first act as Secretary of State was to make online content that promotes self-harm and suicide a priority offence. So platforms must take proactive steps to stop users seeing this material in the first place and to swiftly take it down if it appears. We have also made intimate image abuse and cyber flashing priority offences. And we've introduced an offence in the Crime and Policing Bill to criminalise AI models which have been optimised to create child sexual abuse material. 8 days ago, in response to the abhorrent and illegal spreading of sexualised deepfake images of women and children without their consent by Grok, I said we would uphold British values and British laws. That we would fast-track legislation making it an offence to create non-consensual intimate images, and that I would make this a priority offence under the Online Safety Act too. Since then, I am pleased to say X has announced it will ban the generation of intimate images of real people, something that will be carefully monitored, but which I and the government have welcomed. But, Mr. Speaker, the story does not end there. I know up and down the country, parents are grappling with how much screen time their children should have, when they should give them a phone, what on earth they are seeing online, and the impact all of this is having. Yesterday, I met with bereaved families who have suffered the most unimaginable tragedy as a result of what their children have experienced online. One of the most devastating discussions I've ever taken part in, and I pay tribute to their courage and dignity. I know that many parents are deeply worried about a whole range of other impacts on their children, the consequences for their mental health, their